you would. Thank you. And we'll start off with introductions. I'll just go down the list as I see it here. JR.
Good evening, friends. J.R. Lilly, pronouns are he, him, his, and I am your EPAP advocate.
Thank you, JR. David Hampston.
David Hampston, Executive Director of Piedmont Together, former East Portland resident.
Thank you for joining us, David. Arlene.
Arlene Kimura, East Portland Neighbors and the Hazelwood Neighborhood Association.
Thank you, Arlene. Bob.
Good evening. My name is Bob Ernest. I'm with the Hazelwood Neighborhood Association, and I live on the being developed Parkway on 100 connecting 106 and 107 to Oregon Street.
Great. Thank you for joining us, Bob. And Jesse.
Hi, this is Jesse. I don't have my video on right now, but I am here and I'm with the Argay Terrace Neighborhood Association.
Great. Thank you, Jesse. Steve.
Good evening, everybody. Steve Sigathy here, Portland Bureau of Transportation, Capital Delivery.
Great. Thank you for joining us this evening, Steve. Brian.
Yeah, hi everyone. Brian Poole with Portland Bureau of Transportation. I'm in our area and projects planning group. Thanks for letting me
Great.
come.
Good to see you again, Brian. Linda.
Linda Bauer, Pleasant Valley.
Thank you for joining us. Maggie.
Hi, Maggie Dirk with the Portland Bureau of Transportation, also in the area and project planning group.
Great. Thank you for joining us. It's good seeing you again, Maggie. Caleb.
Hey, greetings, Caleb, and then also
hi,
my associate Robert.
Hi, nice to meet you.
We are in the Mill Park neighborhood. Are part of a nonprofit that employs houseless neighbors through a workforce hub and have done some sidewalk repair and pouring for a couple people in the neighborhood. And so, yeah, just thanks for letting us be here.
Great. It's good seeing you. Thank you for joining us this evening. And Catherine. You're muted, Catherine.
Unmute. Hi, I'm Catherine, and this is my third meeting, and I'm part of a group called Trees for Life Oregon, and I've been corresponding with Sam, and I think this is a really interesting group, and so I'm here to participate as much as I can. Thanks.
Great. Thank you for joining us tonight, Catherine. And last but not least, myself, Doug Armstrong. I'm with the Park Rose Neighborhood Association. I'm the vice chair. I am also a BBAC member. That's the Bureau Budget Advisory Committee for Piedmont. And I am your chair, and I am admitting, if my button will work, Jim Chassie. There we go. And last but not least, Jim, I'll let you get your camera on and turn your mic on and introduce yourself. You're the last person. You're muted, Jim. You're still muted, Jim.
Am I good?
Yep, you're good.
Jim Chassie, Calhurst Gilbert Neighborhood Association.
Great. Thank you for joining us, Jim. And with that, Steve, are you leading us off this evening with our EPIM discussion?
Yes, that was the plan. And then if you're okay with this, Doug, we have Brian and Maggie here to give an update on 122nd Avenue at the end, if we have time and if the group is willing to hear that.
Yes, I would love to hear more. I heard some yesterday. I'd love to hear more today.
Great. Well, I'll make sure we have enough time here. It looked like we were the only agenda item, but let me know. I think my presentation, it clocks in, I believe, just over a half an hour. So we should have plenty of time after that.
Yep, you are the only agenda item. Take as much time as you like.
Okay, and just one word on technology. So I did a Zoom open house last week on another project. And if for some reason I disappear or I freeze, which happened last week, I gave the link to my presentation to Brian and Maggie, and they may be able to rescue me if that happens. Hopefully it doesn't. But I think I found Zoom, it can be a little bit glitchy in the evening. Maybe just everybody's on, watching their TikTok videos or whatever. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Bandwidth gets kind of stretched.
Yes. So, well, okay. Well, then I'll get started with the East Portland in Motion portion of the program, and I have a PowerPoint, so I'll do the screen sharing action here. And let me make sure I'm able to do that. Do share. And then I'm going to get into a larger mode here. Are you seeing a full screen slide?
Yes.
And it's just the slide, not with the next one and the notes and all that stuff.
Correct.
Perfect. All right. Thank you. Well, anyway, thanks again for having us. I'm Steve Sigathy with the Portland Bureau of Transportation, or PBOT. I'm in the Capital Delivery Division as a capital program manager. I have a portfolio of my own capital projects, as well as a team of other project managers working on projects throughout the city, including in East Portland. It's always great to be back here. Doug had requested that we do a 10-year look back on East Portland in Motion. We may have kind of arrived at that together. East Portland in Motion was a 5-year implementation strategy for active transportation. I had the privilege to work on that. I was actually brought on as a limited term employee to PBOT back in 2010, specifically to work on this project. So on a personal level, it's really, it's great to be back here talking about it and looking back on it and being able to work on some of the projects and, joining some of you that have also have a history on this project. So we wanted to do a look back and kind of summarize how we've done. We do have the website. We actually migrated the website over to the new portland.gov. So the website is there on screen, and you can still download the document, and there's some information, including the 10-year summary and other items that you'll see tonight. So what was the context back then? There were a number of challenges and opportunities around that time, 2009 to 10. Of course, that was our last big recession, the Great Recession. And under the Obama administration, there was the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, or ARA, or ARA. People pronounced it in different ways, or just called it federal stimulus. And that provided some money for some quick response sidewalk infill projects. And it also provided, through a CDC grant, a planning grant that actually was what was used to hire me to work on East Portland in Motion back then. There were also a number of other things happening. The Oregon state legislature passed the Jobs and Transportation Act, or JTA, also known as House Bill 2001, in 2009, or it may have been 2010. Might be slightly off on that, but City Council at the time, specifically Mayor Sam Adams, earmarked 8 million of that for East Portland sidewalks and another 8 million for Southwest Portland sidewalks. So we needed to have some sort of prioritization process for those. The Portland Bicycle Plan for 2030, PBOT finished that in 2010, and it had a citywide map of different bicycle designations on different streets. And then there was the East Portland Action Plan in 2009 that really brought together a number of topics to forward the betterment of East Portland. And we're glad to see that that is still an organization with community organizing happening to this day, including sponsoring this Zoom meeting. So that was kind of the scene. There were other things going on as well, but that was kind of the background of how we got East Portland in motion going. And the process we did for this, and again, this was to prioritize projects for people walking, biking, accessing transit. The public involvement process was, I think, pretty robust. We had public surveys and stakeholder interviews. We had some good help from grad students at Portland State University in doing some of that survey work. We did quite a few tables at events. You can see the picture there of Dave Hampston here, along with another gentleman. I don't know if anybody knows who that gentleman is, and myself. At Marshall High School back when we were doing those transportation safety fairs.
That was Walter Lursch.
Thank you. I thought you might know, David.
Yeah. He was often at our meetings.
Nice. So, we went around to a number of these events. You can see Ellen Vanderslice, a past esteemed employee of PBOT, who was sort of the lead sponsor, if you will, at a staff level for East Portland in motion at the Park Rose Farmers Market in, I think that was May of 2011. So we did a number of events like that. You can see, you might be able to make out, we have a chart and some maps in the background. So a lot of voting with dots and things like that. There was the East Portland Action Plan Bike Subcommittee, which David and Jim and others were members of. And really helped kind of look at the neighborhood greenway network and how we wanted to perhaps modify some of the recommendations in the larger bicycle plan, as well as the earlier incarnation of this group, which I think at the time was called EPNO-LUTC. I think it was good that you dropped some letters, but we went there, and that was specifically hearing the different priorities from the different neighborhood associations. Underneath EPNO. And we did, I think, a good effort with outreach to some underserved groups. Of course, we can always strive to do better, but I think this time, we worked with, so when we were starting our relationships with organizations like ERCO at the time, El Programa Hispano, in helping with some translations and just getting the word out to some underrepresented groups. And then on the, on sort of the internal side, we did some GIS or mapping analysis to find out what were some of the project segments that we would get more bang for the buck in terms of theoretical number of users of different sidewalk segments. So that's kind of a process overview of what we did. Now, this was mostly in calendar year 2011. The report was finishing touches we put on in March of 2012, and then it actually was adopted by City Council in April of 2012. And at that point, I was working elsewhere. I think April Bertelsen and Ellen Vanderslice really carried the torch to City Council at that point, along with those of you supporting in the neighborhood. And the result was a project list. And so this is just a screenshot of that summary map, just to give you an idea of all the stuff that was kind of packed into that map. And it basically divided investments into 9 categories. So the way I thought I'd organize this presentation is go through each of these categories of investments and report out on how we've been doing. And of course, let's get this out of the way. It was a 5-year implementation strategy and we're 10 years in. So, that we recognize it has taken longer to deliver some of these. Some of these ended up being more complex than others. We had, some staffing things going on, budgeting things going on. I'm not going to go through any more excuses, but I think, with the increased investments coming in with fixing our streets and other grants, we've been able to really accelerate the work towards the latter half of this 10-year period. So diving into the different project types, and feel free, if you want to interrupt for a clarifying question, that's fine. Doug, I'll let you moderate that. So one of the big types of projects that we needed to prioritize through this was sidewalk. And we had the opportunity to fill in a lot of these gaps of what we call curb tight sidewalk. Now, this is not, and at the time was not the city standard for sidewalk, but along many of these streets that were either built or widened by Multnomah County when it was unincorporated, they provided the curb and the stormwater systems, but left many of the frontages undeveloped. So we did some polling about this. We asked, should we spend more money on smaller areas of wider, better sidewalks, or should we finish some of these gaps? And we got, as is often the case, we got do a mix of both. So we did do a lot of these projects. So you see this list of 14 projects. And in this category, we did well. I mean, some of these came in later again, but out of the 2.57 miles that were listed in East Portland in Motion, 2.46 are complete. We have a small segment in progress on 162nd that's going to get built later this fall. And then we found that there's a very small part on Sandy, I think near 87th on the north side, that we somehow missed. So that gives us a score of 98%, if you will. And when I do these percentages, I'm pulling the complete and in progress. If you want to dock us points and just give us the ones that are complete, you're open to do that as well. Then there was this other category, S23, of unfunded projects. And these were the ones that were, they couldn't fit under that $8 million, but we wanted to, at the time, make sure that there was a record of what are the ones that we want to move on to next once we're finished with these. And as it turns out, we've been able to do most of these as well. So these ones that you see where it says 21, 21, these will be finished this calendar year. So the sidewalks on Market Street are under construction. Most of them are done as part of the East Portland Access to Employment and Education project. And some of them are on Halsey Street, and that project has gone to bid, and we're getting our contractor selected for that project. The only one that we missed, Holgate, we will have a little bit of that coming next year as part of a small capital project on the south side of Holgate, sort of near between I-205 and I think 111th-ish. But there will be some additional segments of that are not done.
Did you figure out the percentage on that previous list?
I didn't do that in the interest of time. I just kind of focused on the, the bigger list. I thought about doing it, but then as I got into the weeds on Halsey Street, I found that in EPIM, it was looking at both sides, and we're leaving out the part next to the golf course, as you know. And so the numbers were getting a bit complicated, and I decided to cut the effort there.
Okay.
But I'll do it on the other categories of other things here moving forward.
Okay, a question before you move on. I want you to go back to the last slide. For Holgate, you said south side?
Correct.
Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. What about improving the failing portions on the north side? or replacing the failing
And,
portions on the
not only the failing parts, but the parts that are just not there and there's just curb and then mud.
Right.
Yes, those are unfunded, and we did have a system development charge funded project that was in the works, and then we had kind of the bottom drop out of our SDC funding, and so those unfortunately became unfunded and therefore are a remaining need, if you will.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. For each of these categories, I tried to highlight one of the projects just to kind of give a picture here. And so the ARA sidewalks, the federal stimulus sidewalks, of course, this predates EPIM by a few months, but I wanted to highlight it because it sort of set a template for what we found that we could do rather quickly on these curb tight situations on these major arterials. So we got the stimulus funding in early 2010, and we actually used our maintenance crews. They just went out there without, really complicated engineering plans, just kind of used a level and measured back and filled in the sidewalk on Gleason between, mainly on the south side, between 122nd and 148th, and then a little bit on 82nd near some of the schools, both northeast and southeast. So that kind of set the tone of what we could do in sort of a quick build situation. So I highlighted that one. Sorry, the images are kind of grainy.
Can I interrupt briefly? I'm glad you highlighted it. This is the project that actually spurred the neighborhoods and all of us into the EPIM, or what eventually became the EPIM. We thought it was such, how should I say it? It's, we're glad on the long term that it was done, but it was such a poor use of our money, given that we had so many higher priorities. Part of the problem is we hadn't really articulated what those higher priorities were. And this really spurred us along to actually articulate that. And so what I had to do was I would collect from each of the neighborhoods what their priorities were, and then feed the lists to Mark Lear, who would then send it on to the engineers at PVOT. But I would also compile a list that went to the planners that eventually went into the EPIM. So there's a double process of advocating for improvements, both through the engineering department within PVOT, but also through the normal process with planning. But at this particular project, we were thinking, it's a minor bus route. It's kind of serves a school, but it really wasn't a priority for the neighborhood. And we had so many higher priorities, but when you look at our list before this project, they really weren't articulated very well. And so this really did inspire us in both positive and negative ways.
Yeah, that's a really great point, David. That's and you were part of that, before I came on.
I was even given credit for it, and I had nothing to do with it. I remember the mayor doing a speech, and I had just joined the Bureau Advisory Committee for PVOT, and he gave me full credit for it, and I had nothing to do with it. And I was thinking, we could do better than that.
Yeah, looking back at that, it looks like we had prioritized some spots near schools, but they, that certainly could have been in other locations. And then later during EPIM, when we did some broader polling, we found, again, I think I mentioned this earlier, that it was sort of a mix of, people saying, yeah, we can get, more sidewalk for less money if you do more of these curb tight ones. But on the other hand, there was just as many people saying, yeah, but these sidewalks are not great sidewalks. They've got power poles in the middle. They don't have a buffer from traffic, and we should do some of the other kind too. So, and if I may, that kind of leads into the next part of the next category of projects, which are the separated sidewalk projects. And you can see the list was smaller. We knew that the dollar would not stretch as far on these streets that don't have stormwater and curb, where we need to build that from scratch. So the prioritized list there, 136th and Prescott at the top. Those did get built. Some of the other ones are are finished. Ramona and Holgate down in Palhurst Gilbert near the schools. 117th is recently funded through LTIC. I'll talk about that, local transportation infrastructure charge. But we're missing the Fremont pathway from 102nd to 112th and the eastern part of Holgate, east of 130th. So here we give ourselves a 66% on this category. And this category also included some of those unfunded next tier sidewalks. And I'll talk a little bit more about 136th here in the next slide. But we did accomplish the rest of that stretch, as well as additional sidewalk on Prescott. But then these last four, these remain unfunded. And so those will, and I know this group has talked about these priorities, which were, to David's point, these were some of those priorities stated by Parkrose, Heights, and Lentz that we've not gotten to. And, you know, just highlighting 136 and, you know, I don't think we can talk about this project without bringing up the tragic death of 5-year-old Morgan Cook back in 2013. Tragically crossing the street with a friend and hit by a car and killed. And that was sadly, but appropriately, inspiration for getting additional funding through the state legislature in the work of then Representative Shamia Fagan.
And the real tragedy was the driver was not breaking the law.
He was going at or below the speed limit.
That's correct. And there was no drugs or alcohol involved.
Yep. So that was obviously an eye-opening moment and you know, incredibly tragic for anybody, whether you're a parent or not. And we got the money to do sidewalk on all of the east side of 136th from Division down to Foster. That was completed by 2015. Then with fixing our streets passing in 2016, we had the paving project and we were able to add SDCs, system development charges, to add sidewalk on the entire west side of the street. And as you probably know, that project has been under construction for a while and is wrapping up in the next month or so. So we'll have complete sidewalk on both sides of the street, new paving and protected bike lanes, and some pedestrian crossings. Moving on to crossing improvements. So in EPIM, we had this under different categories: crossing improvements associated with sidewalk projects, associated with neighborhood greenways, some standalone ones that had already been funded, crossings at multi-use trails, and some other additional locations. And here we've done very well. Out of the 74, I had to count these up discreetly. I fairly close, I believe, at 74, and 55 of those complete, 19 either in design or in construction. And as far as I can tell, none of these are unfunded. So we're at 100, or, you know, we will be when they're built, and they're all in design. So I think that's a success. And the project highlight here, you know, sadly, another project born of tragedy with the safety emergency declared by City Council in 2016 after 2 close together deaths on Division Street. The Outer Division Multimodal Safety Project started as a general fund sort of seed money from City Council, and we grew the project with other funding to the point where it is now under construction from 80th to 174th with 10 new fully signalized crossings, center medians to reduce crashes associated with left turns, protected bike lanes. And obviously we are coordinating with TriMet's Division Transit Project. And when you combine the signals that this project's putting in with the signals that Division Transit's putting in with the signals that went in before, since 2012, we're looking at 24 signals. If you use the term liberally to include some of those rapid flashing beacons, which we're kind of moving away from on the busier 4 or 5 lane streets, but 24 improved crossings for pedestrians on Division.
So when you say fully signalized, are you talking about red, green, amber?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the signals on Outer Division, they had kind of a snowball effect during design. We started with the PHBs, or pedestrian hybrids, also known as Hawks. That was going through some challenges with FHWA approving them. We moved up to half signals, which you see, those were put in kind of in the 80s and 90s in Portland, where it's green, amber, red, but the side street doesn't have a signal. And so a lot of these are actually going to be full signals on Division Street. Neighborhood Greenway. Yes, please.
Steve,
Yes.
what about the the one pedestrian hybrid signal that you have? One Hawk signal at 150, whatever, 4th, 7th?
Yeah, the PHB at 157th will remain as such.
And why is that?
Well, you know, it was that was put in just a few years ago. I think there was a realization that, you know, we don't, while there may be some, one could argue that it's from a user perspective that it could be confusing to have multiple types of signals. But we felt it was it would have been a kind of a waste of money to tear it out and upgrade it. And instead we wanted to focus on other locations that didn't have a signal at all. So we have other corridors that do have a mix of traditional traffic signals and hybrid signals. So that's, you know, we've seen that work. All right. So unless any other questions about the crossings, I can get into the greenways. So I think this is turning out to be a real success as well. It's taken us a while. David and Jim and others would remind us that the first two across the board were supposed to be the 130s and the 4M as sort of the, you know, the plus or the X or the cross, whatever analogy you want to use.
And the 4M was low-hanging fruit, very easy to do, very cheap. And why it was done last is beyond me.
And it turned out to be none of those things, with the level of traffic a little bit higher than most local neighborhood streets. So we've had to do, we're putting in bike lanes on a number of portions of that. It was split into two projects, a number of other reasons, not all of them good ones. So, you know, we got the 130s done finally last year as part of the East Portland Access to Transit project. The 4M is getting done in two pieces, west of 130th under construction now, east of 130th under construction this fall. The 80s southern section was actually quite early on in the scheme of EPIM. And then the 100s and 150s are part of the East Portland project I'll get to in the next slide. The HOP has been built, Pacific Oregon Holiday or Holiday Oregon Pacific. So on this, you know, we're close to 100, we're at 97% once we are complete, but a number of them are currently under construction. And there's actually, the ones you see in 24, those are the ones at sort of the north end of the Knott Russell and the Park Rose Neighborhood Greenway. We were able to get funding in fixing our streets to the gas tax, renewed gas tax for those two greenways. But what I think is great about this story is that, you know, while there is a dense network of neighborhood greenways in inner Portland, the East Portland network I think is going to be really special. It's 30 miles, just under 30 miles of greenways. And especially when we get the 100s and 150s done, you'll be able to kind of have some nice circuit routes for recreation, but then, you know, also connecting destinations, schools, parks, things like that. This is an older map where the 130s wasn't finished yet. And just as a highlight project, East Portland Access to Employment and Education. That's our mouthful project. So we often call it the ED project around the office. This was a federal grant. Some of you will remember that this was extra federal money that came in through our formula federal funds in 2012. And by the time we got access to the grant money and went through a 4-year engineering process, we got to our construction phase this year. And that's 9 miles out of those 30 is being built through this project. So the north end of the 100s, basically from Powell up to north of Halsey-Weidler, the 150s neighborhood greenway from Powell to Halsey, and the western half of the 4M greenway from 92nd to 130th. The project also includes sidewalk infill on Market and Cherry Blossom and 7 new or modified signals. And construction should be wrapping up in October.
So, brief comment on this one.
Yeah.
Dan Bauer, who was negotiating to get the money for it, described it as one of those slimy backroom deals because East Portland had all the greatest concentration of minorities and poor and whatnot. It was used sort of as a justification for 2 interchange projects in completely different areas in the metro area for relatively wealthy white areas. And it was meant to balance those projects with something that was actually getting people to employment and such, using car optional tools. So I'm glad it eventually got funded and I'm glad it's eventually gotten built. But it is for me, a very memorable and somewhat slimy project. I'm glad I think it's great for our area, but it did justify some incredibly awful projects in other parts of the metro area.
It's true. Portland took a different lens on the funding source, and it was different than how Washington County and Clackamas County used the funding. I was actually working at Washington County when they got the funding for the US 26 Brookwood interchange, which is what they used it for. And in Portland, we used it for sidewalks and bikeways in East Portland. So the picture there is the Southeast Franklin 108th connection. So that is paved, and so yeah, this will be rideable. Portions of it are already, and also walkable. So that project is about halfway done. Then there was a category that we called separated in roadway bikeways. We at the time chose to use that wonky term from the Portland Bicycle Plan. Really, it just means bike lanes. But we were trying to pilot what was not quite yet called protected bike lanes at the time. They were called lots of different things back then. So there were 2 pilots identified, one on Gleason, one on Division. And those ended up happening, but in different ways than I think we had intended or envisioned back in 2011. So the Gleason pilot project, originally the idea was to just do what they did in Gresham and get rid of the parking and just turn those into bike lanes and keep it as 5 lanes. But as you know, we did this road reorg project, 5 lanes to 3 to get other safety benefits. And so we have the parking protected bike lanes out there that we put in 2019 from 122nd to 162nd. And then on Division Street, while that's keeping 4 lanes of cars, we're putting in physically protected bike lanes as part of the Outer Division project. Some other bike lanes did not happen. Prescott didn't happen. We did sidewalks on there, but we didn't do the bike lanes. Cherry Blossom is going to get the bike lanes as part of that access project I just mentioned, but the 112th bike lanes did not happen. I actually tried to get that to happen along with the sidewalk infill, but was voted down. So that still remains out there. So we're at about 47%. The bicycle safety improvements and intersections, those were trying to deal with when you're in a bike lane on one of these 5-lane streets and you arrive at an intersection, it becomes a right turn lane. And those still exist. We didn't solve them, but we put in green conflict markings and some other treatments at those intersections through using some federal funds. There are many other intersections we could that remain untreated that we need to get to in the future.
Hey, Steve, are you saying that you are going to put bike lanes on Cherry Blossom down to 102nd?
That's correct. Those will be done by this fall. So
Okay.
they'll be from Market Street up to where it becomes 102nd, 103rd couplet. And so then
But nothing from nothing on 112th.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the missing piece now.
See, I thought I saw in the budget that the bike lanes on Cherry Blossom were deleted. So
No, they are they're there in the project. And what we did end up deleting from the project was the sidewalks on the west side of Cherry Blossom. I know we talked about that in one of the last meetings, but the bike lanes are going in, and as well as a crossing at the that new Habitat for Humanity project right in that vicinity.
So the bicycle safety improvements at intersections project was kind of vague because East Portland already had quite a network of bike lanes, unlike the rest of the city. But we early on recognized the biggest hurdle was intersections. And how do you design an intersection so that it's safe? And at the time, we didn't really know about protected intersections, honestly. So I'm glad we had it in there as a placeholder. And now we would probably translate that as, you know, putting in protected intersections at all intersections. And that is starting to occur in East Portland. So I'm glad we had it in there. And it is one of those, it's like crossing improvements. It's one of those things you can constantly add to and improve upon. Yeah,
very well said. And we are looking into the protected intersection treatment on Outer Stark. Brian Poole, who's with us here tonight, is was the planning manager on that project. And TriMet is putting in a version of a protected intersection, 162nd and Division currently, I believe. So yeah, that was it stated the intent that there was a problem at these intersections. You know, what we ended up doing in those early years was just kind of some green paint, but we're moving on to other treatments. And just again, highlighting the East Gleason project, you know, which I know has been for some a controversial project. You know, we've come to this group to report out on what we found to be the findings after it was built, basically matching the expectations of what we were expecting in terms of the reduced high-end speeding or top-end speeding. The safety numbers and crashes are going to take a year or two to get in to compare and contrast, but also the you know, the addition of the bike lanes and getting some of those pedestrian crossings in. Phase 2, by the way, will be going in as part of the East Portland Access Project. That striping is looking to be later in the summer on Gleason from 102nd to 122nd. That will retain 2 lanes of cars in the eastbound direction, unlike the picture you see here.
Steve?
Yes.
Okay. The one issue that no one at PDOT is willing to address at this point is the line of sight from the cross streets is actually not very good. I have so many people saying that with the cars parked the way they've been parked, they have to stick way out in order to get a clearer line of sight. And that includes then blocking the bike lanes and basically putting the cross street driver in harm's way unless you do like most people who live on the south side are really frustrated by that, because even though there's so much distance, you cannot see clearly, particularly with the topography of the gently rolling hills causes a real problem. We actually asked somebody about that, and I think it was Timor, and he said, well, you'll all adjust out. Well, I'm afraid I'm still hearing that it's a problem, so I don't know when the adjusting out is gonna happen.
No, that's a good point, Arlene. We have heard about that. You know, we really try to get ahead of it. You can see in this picture, you know, we hashed out these areas a certain distance from either side. And I think they're actually longer in the direction where traffic is coming from on your right, or I guess to your left as you're pulling out of a street. So that was the intent of these areas where we prohibit parking. But if people are driving too fast on Gleason, then it kind of messes with the mathematics, and people are having to pull up and block the bike lane, as you say. So I think, you know, I would still call this a pilot project, frankly. I think, you know, if we do this treatment on other streets, our traffic engineers are going to be looking at, you know, hey, is this the right distance that we're restricting parking? Do we need to do something else? You'll see on 162nd, that project going to go to construction this fall and into 22. We ended up using a double buffered bike lane design and kept the parking at the curb. Doesn't fix the site issue entirely, but at least, you know, you're not blocking the bike lane, but that makes the bike lane not a true protected bike lane. So different, I would say this design is still a work in progress. And if you're, I would encourage anybody who's using this part of Gleason, if you're seeing a recurring safety issue at a particular location or multiple locations, to let us know, put in an 823 SAFE phone call or email safe@portlandoregon.gov, or email the project managers that you know, worked on it, to more. I'm allowed to say that. You can email him. So yeah, those are very valid points, Arlene. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
To follow up on Arlene's comment about Gleason and the sightlines, we have the good fortune of having antique cars, and it happened just yesterday. I'm driving west on Gleason, right about this area. In fact, just past that pedestrian, and I'm doing the speed limit in my old car, and a car flies by me in the yellow double striped lane. Can you put Jersey barriers in the middle of the street? Because that happens on 122 also. And it's become like it's unbelievable. And it's so dangerous because people just don't give a darn. And that extra lane now has become no man's land and racetrack. And I was out with the Solve cleanup on Saturday and did a little vigilante work on the corner of 120 or 102 and Gleason. And it was unbelievable the amount of cars that are running the red lights without any regard to what's going on. So we got a huge problem.
I hear you, Bob. Some of the driving I'm seeing out, I was out today in Cully and going back home to Selwood. There's just some appalling driving going on out there, and definitely a topic that we could spend a lot of time on tonight or some other night. But yeah, and you might recall when the first phase of this Gleason reorg went in, one of the TV stations did a news story about it, and in the video they had footage of somebody doing that, passing in the center lane there. So if you see that continually happening, that's definitely a good topic for a safety complaint here. And we will have some additional crossings going in, which, granted, that only helps for that point location, but we'll have new crossings with signals going in at 155th, 108th, and 113th with, and now I got to think about whether those have islands or not, but it's a problem. So definitely recognize that.
Thanks for hearing me out.
Yeah, of course. So a few more categories here in EPIM. We did have a bike parking category, and we were pretty ambitious with this. We wanted to do an East Portland Bike and Shop, we called it, a pilot project where we work with the owners of these private sort of strip style commercial centers that are in East Portland to do some better bike parking that were closer to the buildings. Think about like, Bi-Mart at Halsey and 122nd, or Safeway at 122nd and Powell, places like that. PBOT moved on to other priorities. That never happened. We wanted to get more staple racks in the more traditional business districts like Park Rose and Lentz and Gateway, Halsey Weipler. And we have done a little bit of that. You see the picture there at the plaza at 112th and Halsey. And then East Portland Bike and Rides, we wanted to work with TriMet to get more secure bike parking, like the pictured here, which is actually in Beaverton. So it's kind of a harder story to tell on this topic, but what I was able to do for this meeting is I made this map back in 2011 that showed where there was bike racks in Portland versus, within East Portland, east of 82nd, as we were defining it in this document. And there are a few more, but back then there were 3,728 city maintained bike racks and only 15 of them were in East Portland. So now there's over 7,600 bike racks and 138 of them are in East Portland. So, that's in the right direction, but not a lot. You could say the rate of growth of bike racks was 820% in East Portland, but that's what's that book called? How to Lie with Numbers or something. And then only one bike and ride has gone in, and that's at Gateway, and it's actually part of the parking garage. So more work to do there. You can request, I believe you can still request bike racks through PBOT. I should have written down that resource, but I can get that to you.
So you have my sympathy on this whole project and bike racks. As bad as East Portland was, East Portland's still vastly better than where I live here in North Carolina. And so they have the same issues here as they have in Portland. They want to have the bike parking within a certain distance of entryways. And the problem is when you create a suburban style development, which most of North Carolina is, it's very hard to put in bike racks. And you don't have any extra right of way to put them in. The sidewalks are super narrow. All the problems you have in East Portland, you have them multiplied by thousands % out here in North Carolina, where most cities are built like suburbs. And so the improvements that you have in East Portland, yeah, they do look pretty pathetic compared to the inner part of Portland. But the reality is partly the city code requires the bike racks to be a certain distance from the door for security reasons, and I understand that. And it's partly reflective of those super narrow sidewalks that we discussed at the beginning of your presentation, because there's really no space to put them on there, and the ways the city does bike racks. But still, what you've done in East Portland is an improvement, and I'm glad you recognize there's a long ways to go. But I do recall that you did actually, we did a EPAP pilot project with PBOT where you did put in a couple of corrals scattered around East Portland. And I know some of them have been removed, but I checked on Google Maps, the street view, and a couple of them are still there, at least 2 years ago.
So I may stand corrected there.
Have you evaluated those at all?
Yeah. Yeah, and this also doesn't include, so we actually have a GIS layer, a mapping layer that has the bike racks at schools and parks.
Okay.
So there are quite a few more in parks and schools. These were the strictly the PBOT maintained and installed bike racks. But yes, still a long way to go.
Steve,
yes.
Before you go any further, I'd like to put a plug in here for one of your colleagues that is not present, and that would be Lior. And I'd like to know, in relation to locating more bike racks, how serious is PBOT with fast tracking the Bike Town project? They seem to be bogging down a little bit.
Yeah, and actually the person that you'd want to hear from is Steve Hoyt Macbeth, who
Right.
manages the group that includes Bike Town. So yeah, that's a good question. I don't have info on it offhand, but I know he was looking at very recently. There were some emails where he was trying to find additional locations in East Portland relative to some of these projects.
Right. And I think, before you move on to the next slide, if I'm reading that last rate of growth category, is that rate of growth for people, or is that rate of growth for the projects that have been completed?
Oh, this is just bike racks.
Oh, just bike racks.
Yeah, this is just bike racks. Yeah, this is it's just it's almost just, it's kind of a comical, it's not really an impressive stat. It looks impressive, but it's just going from 15 city maintained bike racks to 138 is all that is.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. I thought I was reading that right. So I'm like, okay. Continue on.
Yeah. Okay. I think we have two more categories of stuff here and then a kind of a conclusion here. So trails were in here. There was a recognition that we wanted to provide some off-street opportunities in partnership with other agencies. PBOT doesn't build a lot of trails. We are building some as part of these greenways, but the bigger trail systems are generally the purview of like Portland Parks and Rec or Metro. So these trails, there is not a lot of progress on them at all. And even the one that I've pointed out, Sullivan's Gulch, is not really in its true intended form. So we had proposed getting bike access on that northern railroad access bridge to Gateway Green, a trail connecting to IKEA, one on the levee near 143rd and the Columbia River, and Scouter Mountain. So the one, and again, this is kind of not quite, hitting the mark in terms of providing a true trail. But in East Portland in Motion, the prioritized segment of the Sullivan's Gulch Trail was from 82nd to I-205 and Gateway Green. It would have, in theory, gone on the north side of the Union Pacific Railroad. And it's a very challenging, like most of Sullivan's Gulch, just a very challenging environment, both physically and jurisdictionally, to build a trail. So we have this other project, actually two projects that are starting design. One of them is actually further into design, the Halsey Safety and Access to Transit project on Halsey from 82nd to 92nd, endpoints west. And that's putting in a two-way protected bikeway on the south side of the street and completing the sidewalk gaps on the north side. And then there's an I-205 crossing at Halsey that is going to repurpose one of the eastbound travel lanes to continue that two-way protected bikeway across the viaduct over to 100th Avenue. That doesn't provide as direct a route, clearly, because if you're going to Gateway Green anyway, you'd have to go through the shopping center still and through the transit center and up the path. However, the intent of this project was to connect the Tillamook Neighborhood Greenway with the Holiday Oregon Pacific. So it's previously was known as the T-Hop connection. And so for that, it's really going to be coming down 92nd, using this two-way bikeway and continuing on the protected bike lanes that we installed as part of the streetscape project and going to the 100s Neighborhood Greenway. So still a good project, we believe, but it's certainly not really truly building a section of the Sullivan's Gulch Trail.
Steve, have a suggestion for you. I realize it's 2023 that you're looking at this, but if you go on the blue one that you've got outlined there and go across the flyover, the freeway, into the Gateway Shopping Center, I hope you're going to address the lane changing that goes from Halsey and the off-ramp on the freeway. It's a disaster 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and bicyclists are going to be crunched in the middle of it. So I think there's a huge safety issue there. I don't know how you would eliminate cars switching back and forth lanes, again, unless you use my ever popular Jersey barriers and run them further up the street. So, but I see death coming to somebody, unfortunately.
Our traffic engineers have a proposed solution for that uses signal phasing. So the bicycles would have come to that intersection and have a red bicycle symbol. And then at some point, both the freeway traffic and the Halsey Street traffic gets a red, and the bike transition to the bike lanes to the east. So
But it's the illegal lane changing at the end of the viaduct and the freeway off-ramp that comes together. That's where the issue is. The signal sounds like a good solution, but you got to get everybody playing by the same rules. And if the bicyclists are playing by one set of rules and cars are playing by another set of the rules, the bike's going to be the fatality.
yeah, and obviously that's what we want to avoid. And we're going to look at probably also some physical hardening of that. We're very early in design, so yeah, definitely safety is the number one, outcome for this, for any design here. So yeah, it's a challenging, it also involves for motorists, some jug handle movements on either side of the intersection. So you're going to hear a lot more about that project once we have a preliminary design to share. Liz Tillstrom is the project manager on that one.
So on the same project, at the intersection of Halsey, where it comes into the shopping center, it's actually a, how should I say it, a square crossing. Because on the north side is the street that goes into Woodland Park. And you already have on your list, though unfunded, the Woodland Park Greenway. So that's where it would begin. And since you're going to have bicyclists heading north through the parking lot, trying to get onto Halsey, presumably you can then hook it into the Woodland Park neighborhood Greenway. And that was one of your unfunded projects on your list.
And that would be pretty low cost. I'll look
Probably.
to see if we can add the, with these federal projects, we always have to worry about the geographical extent, but that's a good point. That would be a connection for that greenway.
Correct.
Well, I don't want to spend too much on that project. I'll let Liz know that there's interest in this project, and if you want her to come, probably in the next few, maybe in about 4 to 6 months, that might be a good time frame. Okay, I lied. There were 2 more categories. So one, there was a general category of roadway improvements, because EPIM was generally oriented towards people walking, biking, and taking transit. But we wanted to reflect that there were some other sort of broad brush safety projects and other improvements happening in East Portland. 4 of those are underway. I shouldn't have put a full check mark against Outer Powell, because that's, we got ODOT's got phase 1 done there, but we worked with Prosper Portland on the streetscape, then the Portland Development Commission, and the streetscape work in Lentz. ODOT did their Sandy safety project, and I'll talk about Powell in a sec. Various local improvement districts have been happening in a few places like Northeast 97th and Burnside. The build out of the Gateway Street network has been largely through just development and a few local improvement districts, as well as the project near Bob's house, and putting in the trail there at Wasco and 106th, 107th. Foster Lentz Integrated Partnership, or FLIP, that project, I understand, is dead. This was an attempt to work with the Bureau of Environmental Services on raising the elevation of Foster Road at Johnson Creek and doing a number of other things. So that is not funded. But really, I feel like we need to highlight Outer Powell. I think that's a success story of advocacy, on your side and with, the legislature in cobbling together over time $130 million for completing sidewalks and bike lanes on Outer Powell from 205 all the way out to 174. The first phase looks pretty much done, and then ODOT is in design and right-of-way acquisition on the second phase. I believe they're saying 2024 construction on that. And the last legislation associated with the project requires the road to go over to PBOT jurisdiction when the project's totally done. So I think this is a huge win, multi-agency plus grassroots advocacy success. And then the last category is we put in some programs. These are education encouragement types of programs that are under PBOT's jurisdiction. And these did happen and they did expand. I believe we expanded to Centennial and Reynolds in our Safe Routes program after EPIM. We were already doing work with PPS and David Douglas and Park Rose. So we still have active relationships with the school districts. The high crash corridors, you know, those kind of got wrapped into our Vision Zero program. And we still we still use the construct of the high crash network and the high crash corridors and do messaging and you know, educational and outreach and billboards and things like that, as well as data analysis and, you know, crash analysis on those corridors. Smart Trips did continue. I don't believe that program has been as active during the pandemic. And East Portland Active Transportation Network branding didn't really happen at a PBOT level. You know, you could give a shout out to Green Lens for coming up with the Lens Green Ring, but there wasn't a city-led effort in network branding. We've been sort of falling back on just our citywide branding of neighborhood greenways. And
But the last item couldn't be done until you've completed all of the first. I mean, you can't really brand a network that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And now that you're building out that network, then you can eventually do this project.
Yeah, I think that's that's a fair point. So I didn't really give us percentage, you know, wins on this one. It's kind of hard to do, but just one little program that we've done during the pandemic are these traffic playgrounds. We did one at Sacramento Elementary School, and this is sort of a Dutch concept where you put kind of traffic stuff in the parking lot of the school and let kids kind of bike around and, you know, learn some of the rules of the road. You know, during the before times and the hopeful after times, we'll get back to our traditional safe routes to school work in, you know, working with districts and with parents to encourage walking and biking to school and having events that they get groups of kids to do that. You know, my daughter was doing that at her school before things changed. So hopefully we get back to that kind of stuff. And I think you have access to these files. We sent them over to Doug a month ago, and they're on the website. If they're not, I'll make sure they are. When we did our accounting on this, and April Bertelson, of course, was doing this for many years after EPIM, just keeping track of the projects. And many of them ended up becoming parts of other projects, and then there were entirely new projects that came in as well. So we kept track of those projects as well that weren't necessarily called out or in EPIM, or maybe they were, but they got bundled into some other projects. So we listed 43 projects that are also active transportation projects in East Portland. And when you add it all up, so this is kind of the, you know, the big reveal here. And it's a lot of numbers to look at, but, you know, depending on how you count, what you want to count, or, you know, the $319 million of investment includes both the PBOT and the ODOT projects. So you know, a big chunk of that is Outer Powell. But so if you take out Outer Powell and you take out the paving and bridge projects, then that number is down at 180. If you include everything, that's 346 million. So different ways to slice it. And then you can see some numbers there about which ones are done, which ones are still partially done, which ones are unfunded. But our talking point is over $300 million of investment through EPIM. And I mean, to try and get a scale, one of the things we are often asked by this group and others is, well, what did you spend in the other parts of town, or what did you spend in citywide? And we haven't been able to do an apples to apples comparison with just this time frame of EPIM. But I think as a point of reference, what I did is I took our actual so CIP, that's capital improvement program expenditures from fiscal 15 through today, and then our projected or proposed capital improvement program up to fiscal 24-25. So that's 10 years. And citywide over 10 years, so it's actually 6 years back and 4 years forward, 10 years, we have an $840 million capital improvement program across all of Portland. So that's not a perfect mathematical equation there, but just to give you a sense of scale, the EPIM investments are about, depending on which number you use, between 20 and 40% of our CIP, and ODOT's. ODOT, you'd have to do a whole other set of equations, but it's a lot of numbers there. But overall, I think for me, seeing this visually, this map was actually more effective for, if you're more of a visual person, just to see the sheer amount of projects we've been able to do. I mean, we're not here to toot our own horn or anything, but when you see the map here and you see thousands of thousands of feet of sidewalk, 30 miles of neighborhood greenways, and over 100 crossings, I think it was a good effort that we couldn't have done without some of the people in the room here. Looks like Sam has a question.
Okay, thanks, Steve. I wanted to point out that 21 to 41% of the capital improvement budget means that 79 to 59% of the capital improvement budget is being spent in the part of the city that has better infrastructure. So it is a $320 million is a massive amount of money, and it is made a massive improvement, but we don't catch up to the quality of life of the rest of Portland if we're getting less of the investment than the rest of the city. And I don't know this, I don't know the exact number, but there's something like 50% of the population lives east of 72nd or something in the city. So we have the population to support at least half of the investment, if not more. And there's a significant gap that we're trying to make up. So I love what I'm seeing here in terms of projects that are done, but I'm also seeing the gap widening, not getting made narrower. So I'm sorry to throw a little cloud of rain on this, but that's what I'm seeing.
That's a fair point, Sam. And I believe the percentage population, we need to get the detailed Census 2020 numbers in from our federal government. Back in 2010, it was around 28% of the population lives east of 82nd. So I think it's closer to 25 to 30%, but that doesn't devalue your point, which is a very fair point. Doug, do you want, I can't see everybody, so I don't know who had their hand raised.
I'm going to just jump in, Steve. This is Jim. From the list, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Jim. Yep. Okay.
From the list that you sent, the updated implementation metrics, it looks like we've gotten about, like your numbers said, about 25% of the projects, 20 to 25% of the projects completed in the EPIM plan, and it's taken 10 years. No, like Sam said, we're not getting an equitable amount of funding, and a lot of that funding is going to the central city. And we have the numbers thanks to Sam Adams. There's the Office of Equity downtown, and I think last year there was a capital improvement program was $165 million, and we've received just a little over that in 10 years. So you have to look at the rest of the city, and it's just not an equitable number. And they're big numbers, don't get me wrong. When you add in the ODOT funding, it certainly makes a big difference. But just like the Flanders Street crossing, that was ODOT money. And the Blumenauer Bridge is going to be all SDC funds. And they're taking priority over, some of the projects that we tried to get done in East Portland. So now it's time to, we put together a letter for Commissioner Hardesty and Director Warner, and we'll see if we can't right the ship a little bit, because I think we did get a little off track. And part of that was our fault. We certainly appreciate all your efforts, you and April and everybody else that's really worked with us out here. But yeah, it's time to move on. I agree with you there, but the amount of funding is it's good, but without this plan, we probably wouldn't have received 10% of that. The need is great, and we just need to move forward, and we'll start with EPIM too. But we need to get this project fully funded first. But it's hard to see central city projects being, built. Even the 60s and 70s greenways being funded and built, and knowing that the East Portland Emotion Plan isn't even fully funded after 10 years. So, and this was supposed to be a 5-year plan, and because that was the very minimum we needed, because we had taken on 44% of the growth from 2000 to 2010 in East Portland. So yeah, if we take any more growth on as is proposed by the shelter to housing continuum project, we're going to need more funding and more work in East Portland. And so, yeah, we're going to have to do that at a higher level, but yeah, we certainly appreciate all your efforts.
Well, I can't disagree with anything you said, Jim, and I'm glad you guys are still engaged. I mean, that's the advocacy of this group, and as well as EPAP and other groups, and keep sending those letters. That's advocacy at work. So I appreciate that.
Right.
Steve, I'd like to pass on a left-handed compliment to PBOT. When you install, in my lifetime, it actually happened. You put a traffic light at 122 and Marine Drive. I can't tell you how many people have noticed that and commented to me, did you have anything to do with that? I said, no, I was involved in the meetings, but I said, I publicly said in my lifetime, I'll believe it when I see it. And lo and behold, it's there, and it is so value added. It's a huge safety issue. Now put one at 33rd. and then my life will be complete. But good job on that one.
Yeah, that one was a challenge with our friends at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers on the levee. That was the main delay on that one, but and will be again on 33rd when we get to that one. So appreciate that though.
Right. And Bob, was that why you had your hand raised? Bob. Up.
I removed it.
Okay, great. And I'd like to direct everyone to the chat. JR was nice enough to enter some stats. And I think that, goes to bolster some of our points. Steve, I don't know if you can read that.
I actually can't see it right now because both of my screens are taken up.
I'll go ahead and read it. It's 1 in 3 youth under 19 live in East Portland. About 2 in 5 foreign-born folks live in East Portland. Half of all families in poverty live in East Portland. East Portland is the only district where poverty has increased since 2010. East Portland has the largest increase in transit riders. So I think that goes to bolster some of the points that Jim made and that others have made in the past and probably will continue to do so in the future.
Those are great facts. Well, not all of them are great, but those are important facts. Thank you for those.
Right. Yeah.
I just have a few more slides. I want to make sure we have time for more questions from the group, and then have time for Brian and Maggie to sneak in here. But we do have, as well as you guys also have, I believe, the list of unmet needs from EPIM, and that had been discussed as part of an EPIM 2. So, you'll see on here, I mean, it might be kind of small on the screen here, but, a lot of good projects that I think are important to, for us to continue to work towards, with whether that's new grant funding or fixing our streets 3, if the voters are nice to us again in 2024. A lot of work to be done. And, we wanted to come and do this, and part of the I guess part of the equation is here is that we are finding it increasingly challenging to use the EPIM project list as a way of framing the percentages of what we did and didn't get done, and what we don't want to forget about EPIM. I mean, I personally worked on the thing, so I have some personal investment in it, but really framing keeping this list handy is important, and then trying to get it into these new frameworks that we have. Vision Zero, the Fixing Our Streets program that has both safety and maintenance projects, Build Portland, which is mainly spoken for, that has the Outer Stark project and the Foster Woodstock project in it, but could become available if council extends that sort of maintenance infrastructure-based program. The Local Transportation Infrastructure Charge, so that's a project you'll hear about in Division Midway, where we have dedicated funding for some of this sidewalks on some of the smaller streets that we can target towards important routes to school and other destinations. And then East Portland Arterial Street Strategy, which is something I presented on earlier. So, this is just, I guess the reason I'm showing this is that we don't want to forget about East Portland in motion, but I think to be most effective is to, and this is not advice, I'm not here to give you advice, but, plug into our new programs, and we'll make sure that we're reaching out with these new funding programs. It's always great to get letters from this group on, which projects are most important when we go to do, for example, another round of regional flexible funds or another round of Fixing Our Streets gas tax, things like that. So these are new things that have cropped up of how we're messaging projects since 2012. And
So a quick question related to that, Steve. Recently, my local congressperson, who's a Democrat, wanted to know what projects locally she should put on the earmark list, because apparently they're doing earmarks again in the US Congress. I'm just curious what list Portland's presented to Blumenthal and others in the congressional delegation for Oregon. And then secondly, what Portland's priorities are on spending ARPA money.
Yeah, those are great questions. And, I haven't been able to be in the room for many of those conversations. Our legislative staff in the Office of Government Relations have been working with some of Brian and Maggie's colleagues actually in transportation planning, like Mark Lear, who on some of that stuff. So I haven't been privy to many of those discussions with my current role at PBOT. I get the projects when they've already decided to what they are. But what I do know is that conversations are being had with the state legislatures that represent East Portland in the state legislature, because they are getting involved in the federal and so on. So I know the conversations are happening. I'm sorry, I don't have any inside intel.
And secondly, you had that list of projects that were unfinished. I didn't see on that list, but it is in the EPIM. I can't remember page 50 or 64. I can't remember where. But we had a bike link across I-84 at 130 seconds. And we gave it various names internally, but it was actually put in the EPIM documents. Now, I'll grant you it was not listed as a priority, but it is an unfinished project. So I don't know where it is on this list, but I would encourage you to dig it up and put something on here for that.
That's a good point. There. Oh, go ahead.
Steve, before you go further, I'm going to answer both of David's points that he's made. David, those conversations with our local congressman have been happening. We have several projects out here that are shovel ready for the ARPA funds, should those shake loose. And in reference to the Katie Larcell Memorial Crossing at 132nd, that does sit prominently in the EPIM 2, should EPIM 2 go forward.
Hey, I have something to add to that too. Initially in East Portland in Motion, they didn't add that crossing, David, because they didn't think, PBOT didn't think it could be done or funded in a 5-year period. So it wasn't added to the list, and it is not in. It's not in the.
Correct, Jim, but we did make sure that it was in the document so that if we ever got an earmark, and at the time they weren't doing earmarks, but now they are. It would be a fat project. You would have to do it through an earmark because it goes over an interstate. But at least we have it in a plan. And a lot of times they won't fund a project unless it's somewhere in a plan.
Yeah, but it's not in the TS. It's not in the TSP, David.
Pardon?
It's not in the TSP.
It's not in the TSP, but it is in the EPIM. And somewhere in the TSP, they did adopt the EPIM. So it's a roundabout way of doing it. But I have seen lots of other jurisdictions do even more roundabout things than that. And even PBOT's done rather roundabout things. I mean, the Bush Street Greenway wasn't in the TSP either.
Right. So, and EPIM has a number of those things. The chapter that talks about the candidates, the project candidates, we called it, were a larger group of projects. And then we narrowed down to what we thought we could accomplish in that 5-year or now 10-year period. So yes, the 132nd Katie Larcell Memorial Crossing was on there. A number of other sidewalk segments were on there, like sidewalks on like Mill Street and things like that. So each of those categories had some additional candidates. So they're another source. I believe correct me if I can find this out, but I thought that the 132nd crossing was in the unconstrained after 11 years bucket of TSP projects, but I could be proven wrong.
I think you're right on that one, Steve.
But I think that's, that's if that's something that East Portland wants to advocate for, we are ready to listen and react. So all I had here, I don't want to get into EPAS. That's too much content for tonight, I think, but just a teaser here and sort of a transition into, and then I could stop to see if there's more questions before we turn it over to Brian. But East Portland Arterial Streets Strategy is a document that we recently finished that serves as a way of trying to communicate all these corridor projects that we have on these major streets. It involved safety analysis, traffic modeling to make sure that the different road reorganizations are not going to quote unquote break traffic, while also providing vastly better facilities for biking and walking and accessing transit. And we did a community survey and gleaned some information from past planning projects. So I could do if I'm invited back, I could talk about this project. Here's the website. I'll also provide you this, the PDF of this PowerPoint. But basically, you know, this was our attempt at showing which streets would likely get the road reorg treatment and which streets would likely not. And then it has links to every project associated with that network. So that is another topic entirely, but wanted to put that on there for perhaps the future. And it's 8:06. So Doug, what do you want to do? We could do more questions on EPIM or give Brian and Maggie a chance to give their update. Whatever you.
Brian and I have been talking back and forth, and I think I'd like to hear a general overview from Brian tonight, and then have Brian back next month for a full presentation. We've got, and this is to put the bug in your ear, Steve, we've got Better Red next month, so you may want to be present for that as well.
Good to know. Good to know.
And their presentation is supposedly 20 to 30 minutes. So Brian, if you want to give a general overview tonight and come back tomorrow, or come back next month, does that sound okay to you?
Yeah, that's perfect. It's totally fine.
Okay. Great. So are there, before we get into you, Brian, are there any other questions about EPIM? I know this was a lot to digest this evening, and there's always going to be in the weeds questions and conversation, but those may be for a higher level offline. Any other questions? I'm looking, not seeing any nodding heads. So take it away, Brian.
I actually have a quick question for you all, and it sort of relates to conversation about EPIM 2. And I was wondering if one of you could sort of help us understand. I mean, are you envisioning that as sort of as a city-led process again, or something that's sort of community-led and with technical support? I'm just be interested in understanding more about what you envision that looking like.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah.
I think it should be a city-led program. It should have, and we started the process back in 2018 briefly, but because we've done, PBOT's been slow to react to East Portland in Motion, and then the pandemic hit. I think included in the letter that we wrote to Commissioner Hardesty and Director Warner, we requested the city take the lead on EPIM 2, and I think we can do it faster than the 2 years it's going to take to do North Portland in Motion, because of the background we have in East Portland in Motion and EPAP, and seeing what's working and what hasn't worked. When we did East Portland in Motion, they've changed the rules in a lot of cases. Like Steve said, it's a long time to have a plan in place, but we won't have real greenways like the rest of the city, because PBOT changed the rules as far as greenways or bike boulevards or whatever you want to call them are dedicated, and how much traffic they can have. So we'll have a lot of shared roadways and whatnot, but no, I think it needs to be a city-led effort, and I think it needs to be done very quickly.
Okay, great, thanks. That's helpful. Yeah, and I know that Steve and I and others have been talking about how do we sort of share out the results of EPIM and try to use that as a catalyst, to build on the work that's been done. And like you all have said, recognize that it's a good sort of first step, right? But it's not that much more needs to happen. And so yeah, I just, that's really helpful to know that hopefully we can, use how we report out on EPIM 1 to build into EPIM 2.
Okay, great.
I do think it's going to be, there's some internal, I know there's areas of the city that haven't had an in-motion plan. And so there's, we do hear that tension, but we do recognize as well the need for additional projects and priorities moving forward. So I am going to, I guess I'll just do a bit of a teaser here. I don't want to share too much, but hopefully it'll encourage you all to come back and learn more next month. So I recently sort of inherited this project. So it started with April Bertelsen in 2017, actually out of a Fixing Our Streets 1 project that was given funding for 2 crossings. And out of that, there was the sort of came to the desire and recognition that we needed to do sort of a more comprehensive look at safety improvements and just thinking about ways to improve access both across and along 122nd and make transit improvements. So that's sort of the origin of this plan. And let's see here. And the goal that was stated at the beginning, and that's remained consistent throughout, is to improve safety, and like I just said, improve bicycle and pedestrian access and support better transit. And I mean, ultimately, the desire is to get this corridor off of the Vision Zero high crash corridor network. And this just gives a bit of a timeline of sort of what work's been done since 2017. So there's a lot of work, and if you probably remember, some of you may have participated in the open houses that happened really in 2018, 2019. That's where we did a lot of the sort of needs analysis, existing conditions work, a lot of public engagement, focus groups, using our community engagement liaisons to do non-English speaking outreach. And then sort of some new things came up. One was that April transitioned out of her role and became transit coordinator. And another thing was we had the Get Moving 2020, the regional investment measure, come up, and it sort of shifted a lot of efforts internally, as well as during COVID last year. And so some of the focus of 122nd that would have gone into developing plan recommendations was really focused on developing the corridor that was part of that Get Moving 2020 package. Unfortunately, it did not get funded last fall by voters, but that it did help in some ways develop some concepts, develop some ideas that emerged out of that first round of public engagement. And since actually that first round as well, we're successfully awarded a regional flexible fund grant for 4 additional crossings, and Fixing Our Streets 2 was approved by voters in November. And so that also some funding there was dedicated to 122nd, both to add street lighting and also to resurface the road south of Holgate. So we're now though in this phase of where we started developing recommendations late last year and sort of engaging with the project, and are now gearing up to share those, sort of engage with the community about the project with recommendations. And our goal is to really get this to a draft and final plan in the fall of 2021. And the idea is that we'll actually tie that together, or the hope, with a RFP for design that would sort of develop a design firm that could programmatically design and then construct project elements as they're funded. So we're hoping to develop a comprehensive list of improvements that could then sort of be delivered as funding becomes available. So I might just share this slide and then I'll stop and see if there's the questions. So we've developed a menu of strategies for how we're gonna make those sort of safety, access, and transit improvements along the corridor. This is just general recommendations. Hopefully, next month I can go into more details about what these look like. But then the idea is that we would phase these investments, and this is sort of the 3 tiers of phasing that we're suggesting of how to make those improvements. So the first is really just focusing on where are the significant amount of crashes happening, those high crash, Vision Zero type crashes, really making the investment there to address the safety issues. A lot of those are happening at those major arterial intersections that were mentioned earlier. And then the second phase would be enhancing travel options for people that are walking, biking, taking transit. And so that's both along the corridors, but also adding additional crossings to provide better east-west connectivity in East Portland. And then the third phase is really recognizing that this is a civic corridor with the town and neighborhood center, and helping support the development that's slated to occur on the corridor, and make sure that we can move people both efficiently and safely as people continue to move to East Portland. So I think I saw a few things in the chat, but I can pull it up, or if somebody just wants to read those out.
We're just doing thanks to Steve.
Okay, okay, great. Does anyone have any questions about this? Or I can share a little bit more, or it's up to you.
That's a good teaser if anybody has questions. Otherwise, we can reconvene next month.
So I have a quick thing. So I appreciate the project you're doing here. One thing I do remember is that when we were originally discussing the gas tax for the city, I remember having conversations with Mark Lear. I think this was about 2014. We were basically imagining how much money would be generated from the gas tax and how much would be spent on East Portland. And we were doing some rough budgeting of, spending money here, spending money there, chiefly for the 4M and for the sidewalks and all that. But I do remember asking Mark Lear to set aside $8 million to redesign 122nd. And I'm seeing the results of that. And it's kind of gratifying. To do some pilot projects on 122nd and try to reduce the crashes, but also to create a main street rather than a barrier, to make 122nd a friendly street rather than a hostile street. And so it's nice to see, it takes a couple of years for any project to go through the pipeline. And so I see this project as part of that ask from way back when. And obviously the money has been reduced or expanded or whatever. That happens all the time, but it is nice and very gratifying to see that you're actually working on this, and that I'm rather impressed.
Thanks for your advocacy. And yeah, I think it's, some of that planning work started with the Fixing Our Streets 1, and then we're actually sort of continuing that planning work using Fixing Our Streets 2 money.
Yeah, Jim, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just might add to Brian, this was something that was the 122nd Avenue plan was something that was in the East Portland Action Plan back in 2009. So getting back to David's comment that he's glad to see it happen, but it's taken long enough. So we need to continue to move forward. So I'm glad you're happy, David, because I'm a little disappointed in the 122nd.
When we build the improvements, we'll try and get some better reception, but this one's been a tough nut to crack. And with some staff transitions and getting the crossing locations right and making sure that the crossing locations are actually going to work. And then, you know, now we have the paving part on the south end and some ideas for that. So yeah, this one has kind of swum around a little bit longer than we like, but Brian's here and he's going to take hold of it and you know, get this next round of input, and that'll set it in motion.
And
But
Jim,
122nd has always been a problem child, and one might necessarily say that 122nd doesn't necessarily have issues. It has subscriptions. With as much difficulty as there is from one end of the corridor to the other being so diverse. And, you know, kudos to PBOT if they can pull this one off, because this is going to be a hard one to solve. Yeah, go ahead, David.
well, I was going to comment that as bad as Oregon is and PBOT is on taking forever on some projects, and of course there's the Gibbs Street pedestrian overpass on over Barber, which apparently took 48 years to do. It's nothing compared to North Carolina. They take 12 years to do a NEPA process here, whereas Oregon is typically about 3 years. They consider Oregon a very rapid state. So, you know, they have projects here that they've been waiting on for over 15 or 20 years, and they're used to it. You know, it's pathetic, of course, and lots of people are dying in the meanwhile, but you know, it's kind of refreshing to come to an area and discover that Oregon is actually pretty rapid and getting projects done amazingly fast. It's discouraging. I agree with you, Jim Chassie, and it is a joke, but yeah, as bad as Oregon is and as bad as Portland is, there are far worse places.
We won't get to get our heads too big on that praise, but
Thank you for the perspective, David. Things are always worse elsewhere. That's always good to know. Not that we want you to have to live in that kind of squalor. So what can you do? Brian, did you have anything else to add, or do you want to leave that as your teaser and we'll pick up next month?
I thought I saw, Catherine, did you have your hand up or a question?
You're muted, Catherine.
So I'm not an official member of this committee, so I'll try to really make this quick. It's the most amazing committee in terms of what everyone does, but City Council approved the purchase of the half-acre property at Mill and 122nd last Wednesday. And so it's an interface with 122nd, and they did it because the neighborhood said they needed a safer route to school and better access to Mill Park. And when you visit that site, you can see that if you look up and down the street, there are no street trees, and it's a curb type sidewalk. I'm learning these terms. And partly it's just because of overhead wires, but it's also just historic bad design, if you want to put it that way. And so when something like this happens, the group I'm part of weighs in and says, are there going to be big trees as close to the right of way as you can get? Because one of the things about your planning that's really striking to me is that the concrete parts of it are engineered really well, and there are no trees in the islands, and you know, it's just, this is really hot when you go down 122nd and you're dealing with the carbon problem with bicycles and mass transit, but you're not dealing with the heat island problem. So I don't know how the committee or PBOT is going to work with parks to buy more of those mini parks along the way to get big trees in, but I just want to put it on the record that it's really needed. I mean, really desperately needed along that street.
You should have been here a few months ago when we talked about Division Street, Catherine.
Oh yeah, we've written quite a few letters about that to City Council. Yeah, and Sam wrote me a very good letter about division and how frustrated you were. So yeah.
Hopefully this is early enough in the 122nd plan that we can avoid that.
Yeah. I mean, you might not get street trees per se, but why couldn't you have properties bought along the way that would have big trees that are protected because it's on city-owned property? Just
But
think
how-
differently. It's a different problem than it is in Sellwood or other parts of the city.
So remember the discussions on division, if we wanted trees down the middle, you couldn't do it because there's a huge pipe underneath.
That's right. It's a
But
water line, and
122nd
it's
doesn't have that problem, does it?
there's a map of I didn't look at it. I should have, of the 24-inch lines. An unofficial map because it's a security problem according to Homeland Security.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it was
I
also
can't even get that map.
emergency vehicles. So
Yeah, I know, it's hard for us to get it. So I've asked that question and haven't gotten a definitive response yet about
yeah.
if there, but yeah, because I want, early on, we want to know, like, how do we avoid this issues?
Could
with
you redesign 122nd to be a boulevard? Have trees down the middle in the median?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, I think the ideal would be that.
Yeah.
But, if there is some sort of water main,
Right.
issue or yeah, then we would have to.
But I have a feeling there probably isn't because of the elevation change. There's 122nd does this sort of undulating thing, whereas division is very level.
And it also has a big curve at the south end of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah,
it
but I mean,
just
they're both very similar in design, and in right-of-way width.
so it's kind of a bureau to bureau cooperation question, to get parks involved with locating, buying the properties, getting PBOT involved with, what needs to happen related to Heat Island. Yeah. And we just loved you guys to weigh in on the tree issue, the transportation people to weigh in on the tree issue. Because it's, yeah.
It was a big challenge that unfortunately we didn't solve on division. One of the challenges we have is that a lot of the information about what's in the right of way comes when we start design engineering and get surveys out there and locate all the utilities and get all that information. And that's kind of what happened we obviously knew there was a giant feeder line from Bull Run in division, and we will have access to the water information when we're getting into design, but it's been a big struggle. We're good partners with all our bureaus, but each bureau has its own priorities, and protecting the water line, protecting drinking water. It was Fire Bureau, wanting to make sure they have adequate response times, and urban forestry, promoting increased urban canopy. And we're trying to build something with all in mind. So
yeah, it's not so much a criticism as it is a way of saying, let's work harder at this. You just can see it coming with climate change and just how hot it is on that street now. And it would improve driving too, which is, it is pretty crazy to try to drive on 122nd, let alone ride a bike.
And Bob, I see your mic is keyed on. Did you have a question or comment?
Just a comment on what Catherine was saying, and also have the conversation about division. I think making it into a boulevard would be a great idea, but if they could get big enough trees to stop the cars from driving down the center lane, it would have a dual purpose. It would address our climate change situation, also add to the beauty and safety of the street. So Brian, you've only got a month before you're going to get to talk to us again. Maybe you could flesh that one out and see if that's even in the realm of possibility. I mean, the division caught me off guard.
Yeah.
Bull Run, I go, we're toast, end of discussion.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a Bull Run running there. Because I remember when I was a little kid, when 122 was a 2-lane road, and we drove out here to look at this big 4-lane boulevard and the new Ron Tonkin dealership and the new,
Yeah.
and they're all still there. So now I'm old.
Yeah.
Well, Brian and team are gonna
We'll do
do
some,
that, and we'll have more.
yep.
Right. We'll expect to have all those problems solved by next month, Brian.
No pressure.
Okay.
Yeah.
No pressure, huh?
Got no pressure. And we've got just a few minutes left. I wanted to do a housekeeping item before we adjourn for the evening. August is generally our really, really slow month. A lot of people are out of town. A lot of people are taking that one last vacation before they quote unquote get back to work. It was very difficult to find last minute people last year in August. So I wanted to run this by the group tonight. Do we want to take August off? Jim, is that a yes? Yes. Sam? Yes.
I'm neutral.
Well, you count, Bob. Do you want to take August off?
I'll go whatever way the group goes.
Okay. JR, how does taking August off sound to you? Okay. It sounds like consensus. Well, we're not really consensus, but the majority says we take August off. So next month we'll see Brian. We'll see I forget her name from TriMet with Better Red. And then we'll take August off. And are there any last minute questions or comments from the group? Jesse, Linda, you've been very quiet tonight. Any comments or questions? Okay, I see no questions. So with that, meeting is adjourned. Thank you.